If you could please take your seats, and we will be getting started on this. So thank you very much for making it out this evening. I'm Darcy Paul, the mayor of Cupertino. We will be continuing with our specific plan process with the Vallco area. Tonight, we have our consultants for the specific plan process, Opticos, out here. As planned, we'll be proceeding with the charrette process, and this is a 1-week-long design. This is charrette number 1. And I just want to say that from my vantage point, Opticos has done a very good job with its principals here, Bill Leonard and Dan Olek, being able to take a wide array of sentiment from both inside and outside of our community, with the idea that we're, of course, focusing upon the residential sentiment, but at the same time, we have a number of various factors that affect, as with any development, the ideas of what we put into it. I believe in good faith that our principals here have done an excellent job in making sure that we're putting forward community sentiment first and foremost. I have personally, seen the very limited amount of interaction and influence from the stakeholder, the primary landowner, and I think that that is a generally good thing. But at the same time, it is a factor that needs to be heavily considered within the interplay of the various ideas that we're trying to put forward with respect to a feasible plan that we can be proposing in this context. And so without further ado, I thank you for coming out. Please tell your neighbors and your friends to come out as well for this process. Keep in mind that this is a specific plan process for the Vallco space. There'll be a little bit of discussion with regard to the SB 35 application put forward by the landowner and applicant as well within the context of what we're doing this evening. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce Bill Leonard from Opticos to lead us in this discussion tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. Here we are at the charrette. We made it. Charrette number 1, charrette number 2 coming up next month. So I'm Bill Leonard. I am working with the Opticos team, and I'm just going to be setting things up here tonight and handing it off to other speakers. First, I'd like to just set some ideas of how we can work together for the whole charrette. Okay? So here's some ideas. Listen actively and respectfully. Balance speaking times. Avoid dominating the discussion. And critique the ideas, not the people. In this room and that room over there, if we can keep that. Now, I know that there's passion in the room. There's history in the room. Come on. We've talked to a lot of people here, okay, and we've heard it. And we know there's passion and history because you love your community. Every one of you. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. So we respect that. But if we can talk to each other like this, we can move things along in a respectful way. So thank you for agreeing to that. Now, here's what we're going to do. Tonight, we have a lot of information to give you to start this charrette off. We're going to have a short poll just to see who's in the room. The city's going to talk about SB 35, the application, and the EIR update. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about why the specific plan is still important to do in the light of that. We're going to talk about the process to date, what we've done so far, and the general plan. We're going to then talk about a preview. We're going to have some previews of what we're going to call brown bag lunches that are going to happen Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday over in City Hall. You're going to see a preview of those from our chief consultants in economics and transportation. Then Dan is going to talk about what's going to happen this week, how it's going to work, and then we're going to break out to the corners. Transportation, form-based codes, the guiding principles, SB 35 general plan. Go to the corners and talk to people. So, I'm going to start with a survey. I'm going to have Aaron come up and help me with this. We do this every time we do meetings. So, first question. Oh, does everybody have a keypad? Okay, who doesn't have a keypad? I'm sorry. Can people, where are they, guys? Can we have our team pass out the keypads? We only have a few questions tonight. Everybody got a keypad? Anybody left out? You need one? The mayor needs one. Gentleman here? Did you get one, sir? You're good? Okay. This is going to take, I think, how many questions do we have? 5?
4.
4 questions. So you know what to do? If you live in Cupertino, push A. If you work and own a business, B. If you're both, C. If neither, D. Okay? Turn it on. Turn the polling on.
It's on.
It's open. It's open. We're watching them come in. Everybody else, everybody vote. Everybody good? Okay, let's see who's in the room. All right. So we have practically everybody lives, owns a business, works here, both. Okay, next. Have you attended a previous session in the specific plan process? So we had one in February and one in March. Yes or no? This helps us think about how we craft our presentation. Are we done? Okay. Yep, okay. And okay, almost half of you have been to at least one session. Okay. Did you participate online on the Envision Vallco online? Did you participate in the online survey?
Or comment.
Or commented. Did you leave a comment there and or participate in the survey? Okay. Okay, 29:41. Okay. So our encouragement is to have you get on that website. Okay, next. Do we have another one? Okay. Okay, this is more of an advertisement. Have you signed up for the emails from Envision Vallco? Flip it on. On?
Mic on.
Mic on. Mic on. Okay, Robert. Have you have you signed up for email updates? Because we're going to update every day this week. We're going to do updates, including tonight's thing. Okay. Let's see the truth.
Still coming in.
Still coming in? Okay. Good. Oh, good. Very good. So the rest of you, you know where to go. All right. Ha. That's not... I don't know. If I try to be funny, I'm not. Okay, so I'm going to have Pew come up and talk about SB 35 application.
Robert, is this one on? Okay.
All right, good evening, everyone. So we have, on March 27th, we received an SB 35 application from the current property owners. Sorry, on March 27th, the city received an SB 35 application for the Vallco site. It encompasses about 50 acres of the site. For those of you that know and for those that don't, SB 35 is a new state-approved legislation that requires cities to review projects that meet certain criteria on a fast-track process. So as long as they meet objective zoning standards or objective standards for that particular project and include a certain amount of residential development and a certain amount of affordable residential units, then that project must be fast-tracked and streamlined in a ministerial permit, with a ministerial permit. In terms of the program for the application that we received, it has 2,402 residential units. 1,201 of those are affordable to low and very low income, at that very low and low income categories. There is about 1.8 million square feet of office uses and about 400,000 square feet of retail uses proposed. With regard to the application, we are reviewing the project to ensure that the project complies with all objective standards that the city has. If the application meets those standards, the city is required to approve the project within 180 days. An SB 35 project is legally protected, and the city cannot require any community amenities for that particular project, and that the city must comply with all the statutory timelines and requirements that are imposed by state law. Therefore, we urge you, and we're letting the citizens know, this makes the specific plan process that much more important than before we received the SB 35 application. As far as the EIR goes, I'm sure everybody has questions about where the EIR is, what's happening with regard to that. So we wanted to give you a short update with regards to that. The specific plan, we're in this specific plan process and the EIR process are tracking fairly closely. We are in the process of conducting all the technical reports for the EIR. Once those reports are completed, that's when the draft EIR will be presented to the public for review. We expect that the draft EIR will be presented for public review in early summer of 2018. So we'll have that soon. With regard to the EIR alternatives, there have been some questions about that. We are looking at a number of EIR alternatives, and they're still under development. But the ones that we've heard from the community about, and the ones that we are studying in the EIR, include a mixed-use project with general plan allocations that the city has for non-residential uses, and the maximum density that's allowed on the site, which is 35 dwelling units per acre. Another alternative, well, the project itself is what the general plan allows with our residential allocations. We have a residential allocation system as part of our general plan, and that is the project that's being studied as part of this EIR. Another alternative is to study an alternative where there is no office included in the project, and what does that mean in terms of environmental impacts. And then the state law mandated alternatives, which is the no project alternative. And we're also, as information, looking to provide an analysis of what happens should the mall be re-tenanted or reoccupied. So those are a few of the alternatives that are being studied, and then others as they come up would be incorporated in the EIR and presented in the draft EIR. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dan Olek with Opticos. Thank you.
So a quick housekeeping, if you could pass your keypads to the outside of the rows, that would be great. These are actually being borrowed, so we don't want to lose any of these. So as Pew mentioned, I'm Dan Olek, and I'm the principal of Opticos Design, and we're leading the specific plan process here for the Vallco Special Area. And I think it's been a really interesting last 7 days, I guess, since the SB 35 application was submitted. And we've gotten a lot of emails, we've had a lot of phone calls with people saying, like, how could you have possibly not known that this was happening? And what I have to say is that, we've been very transparent this whole time. I think we've been very upfront, and we've sort of had very open lines of communication. I just want to be really clear that we had absolutely no idea that this was going to come. And I'm not sure anybody outside of the property owner's immediate circle did. So so then the second question that comes to mind is, which I'm sure a lot of you have been thinking about over the course since that application is, well, why would the city move forward with the specific plan process with this SB 35 submittal on the boards right now? So we felt it was really important to just address this up front and to sort of put some thoughts in your heads and have a conversation about this as we move forward. So why is the specific plan process still important? There's three primary reasons that we want to throw out there for you guys to think about and for us to discuss, is that we feel that this specific plan process is truly the opportunity for the community to put forward a preferred option a viable alternative option compared to what is on the table for the current SB 35 proposal. Like, this is the community's opportunity to discuss and put on paper and create a plan and standards for their preferred vision. Now, could the property owner decide to move forward still with the SB 35 submittal? Sure. Could the property change hands tomorrow or in 10 days or in 1 year or in 5 years? Yes. So we need to make sure to have this plan in place, just to work with you all to get this plan in place. So right, there's obviously a set of desired amenities to a vision for the Vallco Special Area that the community desires that aren't currently in the SB 35 proposal. And it's everything from some sort of benefits to the local schools. It's about really high quality civic and open spaces, potentially civic spaces, community theater spaces. There's a lot of elements that have been discussed that were even in, some of them were in the earlier proposal, improvements to pedestrian and bicycle connections. So this is really the opportunity to be thinking about what sorts of those amenities would the community desire to have in a vision for this project area as a conversation point with the property owners. Then lastly is, and we discussed this last time and we're going to continue to discuss this, it's right, we're not stopping at a plan. We're actually going to be creating objective standards to predictably implement the plan. And why this is important, it's important for a number of different reasons. Once again, like I said, the project that's on the table could get built. The project's on the table, the project could turn hands. I mean, there's a lot of different things that happen in sort of the development process that makes a total sense for the community to go through this process and create these objective standards. And there's also, in addition, there's already a list of additional state level laws related to planning and entitlement that may basically apply to this site. So those series of reasons are why it makes sense to continue to move forward with this specific plan process. So a quick summary of the process to date. And it looked like about 2/3 of you had participated in other the two meetings or the interviews that we've done. But what I will say, and Bill and I were discussing this over the last couple of days, is, I mean, we've done this a lot. Bill's been doing it for 30 plus years probably. I've been doing it for a little over 20. We've done a lot of these processes, and they always have a very robust public engagement process, but this one, I mean, at least in our experience, is the most robust public engagement process that we've ever completed. So, and we're just getting started, right? We're nowhere close to the end. Like this, we're just getting started. We're what, 4 months in? And we're excited about it, and we're excited to be working with you on this. So we've shown this diagram in the past. This is on the website. This is just really important to understand how this sort of community design process works. And it's a lot of this is about what we call feedback loops. And Bill talked about this in the kickoff meeting. I talked a little bit about it last time. But we had the kickoff on February 5th and 6th, where we had the meeting in the evening. Then we had some group interviews the day after that. And that's the first feedback loop, right? We're gathering information. And then we did the existing conditions and guiding principles session on March 13th. And we had started to digest all of that input that we got from you all at the meeting, maybe online in those interviews, and drafted that first pass at those guiding principles. And I'll say, and this is typical, we get some things really right, we get some things wrong. That's why they're draft. That's why we continue to do this engagement process. We'll continue to work with you to refine these and integrate them into the process for this. But what this SHRET process enables us to do is complete a series of feedback loops over the course of the next 5 days. So I'm going to talk about the SHRET at the end of this process, but we're going to be generating design ideas and drawings to to support those in the studio. And you all are going to be able to sort of comment on those in a series of different ways that I'll explain. But each of those times, sort of we're presenting information to you, and you're saying, I love that, I hate that, I would like this if you did A, B, and C to it. It's just this continuous feedback loop over the next 5 days. So, and then ultimately, sort of the value of having the second charrette then in May is that we can come back and actually get another series of 2 to 3 more feedback loops through that process. So I'll talk about the charrette toward the end of the presentation. But we've calculated very generally that we've had at least 90, if not closer to 100 hours of engagement. The kickoff presentation, there are about 150 people at that kickoff presentation. The interviews, we had about 65 total participants over the course of the day for those interviews. The last existing conditions and guiding principles, we had close to 100. And I guess what this is telling me as well is that we need you all to work with us to get people to come this week. I have to admit that, I mean, there's close to, it seems to about 70 people here tonight, which is not a bad turnout, but I'd love to see over 100. The more people we can get, the better. So I do encourage you to sort of reach out to your friends, your colleagues, and invite them to come to the charrette process over the course of this week. And then Bill in particular, I've had a few of these, has had a tremendous number of one-on-one meetings. You know, let's meet for a coffee. Do you have time for a phone call? Can we just meet for 15 minutes or 30 minutes or 45? So we've been doing that, and we've done that there's been over 50 hours of just that one-on-one feedback. So it's been a really a robust process to date. And in addition, we've got some really great online engagement tools. And we've had almost 3,000 unique users, which is pretty good. I mean, we're not Google, we're not Amazon, but 3,000 participants is not bad. And we've had almost 5,000 visits. So of those nearly 3,000 people, a handful of those people have been to the site more than once. So that's a really good, and about 180 took the guiding principle survey online. So we're feeling okay about that. Once again, we'd like to get more people sort of participating online. So once again, please do encourage people to go there. We are going to be doing daily updates on the site for every day of the charrette. There'll be presentations to download there. There'll be some images and just a really brief text summary of what happened over the course of those days. Another couple of really neat events that we hosted. We actually went out to Cupertino High and did a participatory process with one of the classes there. It's pretty obvious, actually, from the very beginning of this process. I think even when we were first sort of meeting with the city council to discuss the process before it kicked off, I think there was a teen group there that gave a presentation. I can't remember if it was either just before us or after us, and they're pretty sharp. You have pretty sharp teenagers in this community. So we do want to try to continue to engage them in this process because they do bring a different viewpoint. I mean, you can even see from sort of the word matrix here that, they're thinking about food, they're thinking about spaces to hang out, they're thinking about the movie theater. So we want to continue and really expand our outreach to the youth in your community. And then the staff went out to the middle school, and they once again they did a vision wall as well. And this is just another important part of this process, trying to get the different segments of the youth involved in this process. So I felt it was really important in this presentation to take a step back and to present 3 or 4 slides on what the general plan says about this site. Because I'll say that I missed it in the last presentation, and stepping back I realized, wow, there's a lot of really good work that the community has done within the general plan that can be the foundation for what we do here. So I just wanted to go over a few of the highlights. And once again, there's going to be posters both in the breakout tonight as well as in the charrette studio that if you have specific questions about the general plan, we're going to grab somebody and we're going to say, this is the city's expert on the general plan. Let's talk about that and answer your questions in detail. right? We drafted these guiding principles for the Vallco Special Area specific plan, but you all did this for your specific plan. And when I actually stepped back, I had looked at these about 3 or 4 weeks ago in your general plan and sort of dove into the guiding principles for the specific plan area. But when I actually started comparing them, I'm like, there's a lot of what we were saying in terms of the guiding principles for the specific plan area that are already inherent in your general plan. So let's build upon that great work that you did there, and let's just supplement that for the Vallco Special Area specific plan. So I just wanted to reinforce that, and I encourage you to come to the boards during the SHRET process and take a look at that, or even go online and re-download the general plan, because it's actually a really easy to read document for a specific plan. It's a pretty big one. I think it's 500 and some pages, but there's really good content and really good summaries there. So the other thing, and most of you probably know this, but I just wanted to reinforce that the Vallco area is one of 9 special areas identified in the general plan. So we can talk with you a little bit more about what that means, but it was really clear as you went through your general plan process that this is a special type of area. We need to think very carefully about it, and that's why it's designated for a specific plan. And that's why we're working on this process. And this whole idea of creating a walkable, vibrant, mixed-use area we think it's a great idea. We've heard from a lot of you that you think it's a great idea, but the foundation was really established in the general plan for this. This is directly from the general plan. Land use goal number 19 is to create a distinct and memorable mixed-use town center that is a regional destination and a focal point for the community. That's pretty strong, and that's pretty powerful. I really like that. So, and then this last policy simply requires a specific plan that lays out the strategies to implement the community's vision for doing that. So that's why we're here, and that's why we're doing this project, this process. So once again, a quick summary, and we're going to talk is in terms of what program that the general plan allows for the Vallco site. Is it requires 600,000 square feet of a retail. It's a pretty broad definition. 180,000 square feet of retail/entertainment, 2 million square feet of office, 339 rooms of hotel, and 800 housing units, which includes the additional units allowed from the housing element. There's a whole series of layers of ways that units can be transferred onto the Vallco site to meet the city's housing element targets. So we can talk about those with you as needed. So the next step is next section is the guiding principles. And so what we did is we took the information and the feedback that we got from you in the surveys last time at the last meeting. We aggregated that with the information from the online surveys, and we took a step back and said, based on this feedback, how should we refine the draft guiding principles that we presented last time? And so that's sort of a part of that feedback loop. And so we wanted to update you on this. And what I'll say is the complete survey results are over on the wall. Didn't feel like you necessarily wanted to systematically go through every single question. Thought we might put you to sleep on that front. So I just want to give you some of the highlights and some of a few of the questions that scored the highest, the most people saying, yes, we strongly agree, and then a few that were not so clear, and talk about what we do with those as well. So the first one was just simply asking the question about how important it was for the Vallco specific plan to provide a vibrant retail environment that combines goods with entertainment. And between the people that said they strongly agree or somewhat agree, it was almost 90% of the aggregate. So it's really clear that this is a guiding principle that should make its way up to the top in terms of a priority in this effort. And so what we did then is we say, okay, let's go back, let's simplify, let's clarify, let's remove some of the guiding principles. And so this one actually worked its way up to the top, sort of very clearly. This is a really strong priority for the community. The second one was just asking the question of how important it is that this process carefully assess and monitor potential impact on schools. right? We've heard this over and over, interviews, first meeting, second meeting, right? Once again, almost 90% of participants said that this was really important. So we sort of make sure that it's an important thing for us to keep in mind as we're moving forward in this specific plan process. And so it's there. It's one of the top 4 principles, making sure that the features would benefit the schools. And that can be a lot of different things that we can talk about over the course of this charrette process as well as the longer process. Then the third one that scored very, very high just simply had to do with sort of transportation solutions. And we know that one of the primary concerns is if development comes, how does that impact the traffic? So that's a really, really important question and a big issue for us to be thinking about. And Dara from Alta is going to talk a little bit about that tonight, and then we're going to continue to be thinking about that over the course of the next 5 days. So the question was, how important is it to eliminate or reduce potential traffic impacts? And once again, we're talking high 80-some percentage of people sort of agreed that was important. So that's a priority to us. That's integrated into our guiding principles. So you'll see there's a board up in the Charrette studio. I don't think we actually have it up here tonight. That's the new draft of the guiding principles. It's actually here, so it's in the back here. So you can comment on those as well. Okay, so some of the questions didn't score so well, or they sort of scored fairly neutral. Almost just as many people were strongly agreed that is important, and others sort of didn't feel it was so important. And one of those was this question about predictable implementation with the form-based code. And I would say that part of this response was partly due to our lack of clarity in what a form-based code is. What we're talking about is a new set of rules or a new set of zoning that would be written to implement this plan, and doing so in a very predictable way. But we responded to that by saying, okay, so tonight when we have breakouts at the end that Bill mentioned after the presentation, we have one particular section on form-based coding. Form-based coding is right here in the purple. And we have a brown bag lunch on Thursday that's focused on that. And you can ask us at any point in this process more about that. And we'll continue to provide information and clarify why we felt that was important, but also weigh the fact that you all feel that, based on this polling, it wasn't at the top of your priority list. And the other tough challenge is the question about sort of providing office space on the site. Scored pretty neutrally. There wasn't a large amount of people saying, we need to do this. There wasn't a lot, it was pretty equal. It was pretty neutral. The reality is your general plan allows 2 million square feet of office space. The SB 35 submittal was at 1.8. Should I remember that? I'm still studying this. It's a big submittal, 1.8. And, we need to think about, and Ben will talk about this a little bit, is we need to think about in terms of viability, kind of what's the, how many public benefits are you thinking about? Is there, anyway, so we need to think about the office. We need to have a conversation about the office. We'll be showing you some alternatives through the course of this week, and we need to have a conversation about sort of where that office space will land. And maybe, talk about, get more specific about the type of office space that is. And I think that will help in that conversation. So as I mentioned, we revised the guiding principles. I'm not going to actually go through these in detail. They are on the board in the back of the room here, and we'll continue to talk about these and tie these into the concepts as we move through the week. Next, I'm going to hand it off to Ben from EPS to talk about, what I would say is this is why I get excited about the SHRET. It's when we actually get our entire team here. It's not just the urban design and planning team, it's the economist, it's the transportation team, it's even pulling in the EIR team as needed to really try to figure out a solution and to really create a strong vision for this specific plan area. So with that, I'm going to introduce Ben.
All right, good evening. My name is Ben Sigmund. I'm your dismal economist here, dismal scientist. So in that regard, I'm here to sort of bring to bear some facts. And so let me just tell you, I'm an economist by training, and I've been doing land use economics, real estate, and public policy for about 20 years. So try to bring that all to bear in assisting you in coming up with some realistic alternatives for the Vallco site. Let's see. So let me just quickly talk about the scope of work that the city engaged my firm to take on. And just really quickly, the firm is Economic and Planning Systems. It's about 35 years of consulting in the Western U.S. We have 3 offices in California, an office in Denver. And this is core competency for us. We do real estate, we do regional economics, we do public policy analysis around these things. So here, for this specific plan, we're doing this value and cost side. That's really a market study. And we're looking at what the real estate market is telling us about what the investment community wants to build. And out of this process this week, we hope to get some pretty clear alternatives, what a program mix might be for the Vallco site. And we're going to start to test that. We're going to take the assumptions and data we have from our market work and start to put that into a financial model that reveals to us whether these projects are something that the private sector would be interested in taking on. Also, as part of this fiscal piece is essentially the impact on the city and the general funds. So along with these alternatives, we want to test what the tax revenue value side is for the city and also the costs of providing public services to the project to make sure that this is a reasonable project alternative from a general fund standpoint. And then we will conclude as we get into the second charrette with some of the finer grain recommendations around what we think is going to make this the best project from an economic and financial and fiscal standpoint. I bring with me a couple of sub-consultants who are assisting. On Wednesday, we'll have Steve Lawton from Main Street Property Services. He was here over the summer doing the speaker series. He's an expert in retail. And I'm going to talk a little bit about retail tonight, but we're really going to dig in on Wednesday. I've also got a couple of consultants, BKF and Sailor. They're helping me with the cost side. So it's really important to realize that even though we've seen run-ups in, as I'm sure you know, in value in Silicon Valley, so real estate is extremely expensive now, costs have gone along with that. So that makes it just really challenging to build, even though it seems like it would be a windfall. It's not, because costs have largely kept up with value. And so I want to look at that graphic on the right. This is something we're really going to dwell on once we get into this financial feasibility testing. On the left, I'm essentially showing you market value. That's what someone might buy the project for, right? That's essentially the pie, okay? The pie doesn't get any bigger. The market speaks. It says the project's worth X. What do you have to do to build the project? Well, you have to buy the land. You have to pay the construction workers. There are a number of what we call soft costs. There's permitting costs, architecture, engineering, so on and so forth. That all has to fit into the pie. And so a lot of times, it doesn't all fit. And we're talking about, whether the city or the state or somebody can come up with some grant funding, some way to fill a gap. Here in Cupertino, we're more likely talking about the benefits that might come from a project. So above and beyond what they pay for the land, the applicant may be able to fund some community amenities. We don't know. It depends on the mix of programming. Affordable housing is expensive. Some of the things like retail may not be a huge revenue driver for the project. And we just have to keep these trade-offs in mind, as Dan mentioned. So just big picture, when we approach this thing, the first thing we're asking is there a market? Do people want the space? Are there consumers out there who are going to spend time in the space? If yes, the second question is it financially feasible? Would someone invest money in it, building the space, going through all these costs to deliver it? And if yes, maybe there's a little extra for community benefits. If no, maybe there's a way for the community to fund some of the community benefits they want through other means, whether it be public finance or grants, so on and so forth. So I'm going to talk about some of the main trends we're seeing in the marketplace really quickly tonight. And I encourage you all to come back on Wednesday. We're going to dig into the market work in much more detail, and we're going to have a small group. You'll be able to ask a lot more questions. That said, I'll be here later, too, to answer questions about any of this stuff. So we start with retail, okay? And what we're seeing is very strong lease rates, sign of a healthy retail real estate market. What we're looking at is Cupertino versus the county overall. And just to further put this into context, retail lease rates, these are averages, asking rates now, 20% higher in Palo Alto. So it's strong here, but not the strongest we see in Silicon Valley. The lower chart, what we're looking at is vacancy. And you can see that in recent years, we've had a spike in vacancy in Cupertino. That is 100% due to Vallco. The emptying out of Vallco is that vacancy spike we see. So you take out Vallco, and you actually have a very, very small vacancy rate. Only 2% of the square footage of retail in the city is actually vacant and available, which is extraordinarily tight. So bottom line is, Vallco aside, it's a pretty healthy real estate market for retail. But it is worth noting, and I think you've all seen in the headlines, that retail is a challenging business these days, especially malls. Department store closings were at an all-time high last year. I think JCPenney, Macy's, and Sears closed something like 9,000 stores. And so that's a huge issue. Malls are evolving, so there is new investment in malls, but it's mostly to diversify the mix of tenants and the mix of uses to create essentially places where people want to spend time. So they're changing with the times. It's not just the mall of yesterday, and that's something I hope we can get into more on Wednesday and potentially tonight as well. So I'll just keep going. Office, obviously Silicon Valley, a tremendously strong office market. What we see on the top here is the first peak, both in Cupertino and Santa Clara County overall, the .com, right? And then .com bust. You see basically lease rates falling as demand wanes, and then climbing back up, a nice steady recovery from the recession. We're essentially where we were around the .com period now in terms of lease rates in the city and in the county. And then vacancy, really, again, as with the retail, when you exclude Vallco, extraordinarily tight market, right? So companies who want to be here can't find space. 2% vacancy or something like that. As an economist, if it's 10%, I'm usually pretty happy. So this is really tight. And it has a lot to do with the general plan, the need to get office allocations, so on and so forth. There haven't been new office projects, and so vacancy is really about as low as it'll go. Residential, I'm looking now at rental, okay? On the top, we've got lease rates. It's sort of a steady climb out of the recession again, and a little bit higher lease rates here than county overall. What we're looking at is the average of all the rental product that you have in the city, though. If you were to pull out just the new lease rates, we're showing it's $3 a foot, so for 1,000 square feet, a $3,000 monthly rent. Closer to $4 a foot, $3.75, $4 for the newest stuff here. So very strong lease rates, as with the county overall. And then on vacancy, you see the ups and downs. This is pretty normal. As a new project comes on, it's empty, has to fill up, so you see the vacancy spike, and then it's sort of drawn down. But again, you know, we're below this kind of 10% vacancy threshold. Very healthy market, delivery of a couple new projects, and they're filling up. So that's great. We have a lot of confidence in the residential market, and certainly the discussion of housing crisis would support that as well. Demand at all price points. And lastly here, in terms of uses, I'm going to talk about hotels. We've seen a tremendous run-up in room rates. Supply, has there been new hotels? There was the Aloft is relatively new. Your new Marriott Residence Inn last year, new. We've got one hotel under construction and 2 others proposed here in town. So obviously the market is responding to this hotel demand. And so we think this can be it is part of Vallco now, at the new Hyatt House under construction. Probably not, at least in terms of my 5-year outlook, a whole lot of need in addition to the hotels that are in the pipeline, but I wouldn't hold back if you feel like it belongs in the program. The long-term view is that hotel demand will kind of grow with the economy. It's a very business-oriented hotel market. It's 80% occupancy overall. You're hitting something like 90% midweek. It's really driven by this business travel. And so if there is a big office component in the program, hotel may come along with that. So I just again want to plug for the Wednesday lunch. I'm going to be here with Steve Lawton, and we are really excited to dig in. We're going to have more data, more stories about malls, that kind of thing. So I hope to see you all there. And I'd like to introduce Dara O'Byrne with Alta Planning to talk about transportation.
Thank you. As Ben mentioned, my name is Dara O'Byrne. I'm with Alta Planning and Design, and we're working on transportation for the specific plan, and we're also working with the folks that are working on the EIR, because of course they're looking at transportation as well. So one of the things, you know, as Dan was talking, I know that transportation comes up in the conversations throughout this process as one of the concerns and challenges. So we all know that, you know, the challenges around commutes and traffic, both in both within Cupertino, but California as a whole, within the region, within the county. Cupertino has about an 80% drive alone rate, which is pretty high even for the region. Very few Cupertino residents actually work in Cupertino, and most people who work in Cupertino live outside Cupertino. So that means that a lot of people, are leaving and a lot of people are coming each day, and a majority of those folks are driving alone. And so that creates traffic. But we also know that transportation and traffic creates environmental issues. Transportation accounts for about 40% of California emissions. We also know that this creates health issues, whether it's obesity, asthma, heart disease, things like that. So, these are big global state, regional issues around transportation, but they're all things that we're thinking about as we're thinking about, the land use mix and all of the things that are going to go into the specific plan. We're thinking about how transportation plays in. And also, of course, we know the synergies between land use and transportation, and specifically housing and transportation, where people live and the options that are available to them in terms of housing, and then where they work and how that impacts their travel behavior. So these are all things, again, that we're going to be talking about at the brown bag and getting into more specifics. So this is just a little bit of a teaser, if you will, for the brown bag that's happening tomorrow. But really building off the guiding principles that have been talked about, seems like a lot of people were really supportive of focusing on innovative transportation solutions. And so that's really what we're going to be thinking about throughout this process. How can we come up with innovative solutions? How can we change the number of folks driving alone and really creating issues around traffic? So eliminating or reducing traffic impacts, that's definitely a concern of the community. Really thinking about how we can improve mobility choices for folks. Not everybody can drive alone, whether it's seniors or youth or folks that just don't have access to a car. And then really thinking about the future of mobility. There's a lot of things, this is, Silicon Valley, there's a lot of new things happening around mobility. So making sure we're not leaving that out of the planning for the future. So one of the things we're going to be focusing a lot about and thinking about is transportation demand management. And this is just really an opportunity to think about strategies that are aimed at reducing those single occupancy vehicles, those folks that are driving alone, and how can we reduce the demand on our roadways. So we've been looking at different case studies, and again, we'll talk about this more tomorrow, but we have some boards up there we're really looking at what are those innovative solutions that folks are using from across the country to really impact this issue so that it doesn't impact the nearby communities and the folks that are going to be living, working in the area. So we've been looking at some of the ones that we've highlighted here are Stanford University. Seattle Children's Hospital has some really great best practice in terms of programs that have been introduced. And then we looked at Tyson's Corner, Virginia, getting out of the West Coast a little bit, really to look at another example of a mixed-use former mall that was redeveloped, and we're looking at, what are the things that they did. But this is just a sampling of some of the case studies and innovative solutions that we're looking at. But I did want to mention just some of the successes that these case studies have had. So Stanford has really been able to reduce their drive-alone trips. They've reduced by over 25%, and so they're now at around 40% drive-alone trips, which if you compare that to the 79% in Cupertino currently, that would be a great outcome for this area. Seattle Children's Hospital is down to 38% drive-alone trips, and that's in a residential community. It's not downtown Seattle, and so they really did some innovative things. So how can we learn from that? And then Tyson's Corner is still newer, so they don't have the same results, but they've also shown significant reductions in those drive-alone numbers. So we're really focusing on what can we take from all those examples and other examples from Vancouver, British Columbia, or other communities that are innovative that would potentially work in this community. But I think one of the things that we'll be talking about again tonight and tomorrow is really that all this transportation demand management is really thinking about strategies to address transportation. So one of the key things, of course, as I mentioned before, is what is the land use mix and how is that going to impact the type of trips that people take? And so some of that we will be responding to in terms of what you all come up with and the urban designers and planners come up with. But also part of our job will be to say, okay, well, if you're going to have residential, how can we ensure that there are residential supportive uses to really reduce the number of trips that those folks living there need to take? If you have office, same thing. How can you ensure that there's those uses that are supportive so that people don't have to drive, to get their dry cleaning done? There's dry cleaning right there within the development. So there's a lot that can be done. There's a lot of synergies there that are really important to reduce those trips. And then, of course, looking at transit and active transportation infrastructure, this is going to be really important. If we want to move the needle and really create that opportunity for people to bike or walk to work, one of the things that Stanford has been so successful at is really getting people biking. And a lot of it has been investment in infrastructure so that folks living within a 7-mile radius of Stanford are biking to Stanford. And then looking at parking. Parking isn't always the most exciting thing to think about or talk about, but it's really a critical component of making a successful transportation demand management program. And it's because if we just provide free, ample parking, people will drive, and we won't be able to kind of influence those drive-alone trips. So there's a lot of strategies around charging for parking for certain uses, reducing the amount of parking, and then also just influencing behavior through asking people to pay for parking daily versus if they pay on an annual basis, then it's just automatic. They're always going to drive, even if it's the same price. So there's a lot of things and there's a lot of learning around human behavior, and that kind of goes into my next point around programming and communications. How do you change behavior? Well, we really think about making it as easy as possible to make the choice to not drive alone. So that's making transit and other alternative modes like biking and walking as feasible and easy as possible, and then making the behavior that we don't want people to take, driving alone, make that more difficult. So we have these levers of incentives and disincentives. So, for example, Stanford pays people not to drive alone. They get a stipend for each day or month that they don't drive alone. And then they charge people that do drive alone. So there's a lot of different levers that we can pull to influence behavior. And that feeds into kind of the programming and communications. And communications is really around just making sure people are really aware of their choices so that it's never a question of, well, I don't know what bus to take, or I don't know how to connect to the train. Where does this shuttle go? You really want to be able to communicate and share information easily. So as we're going through this process, we're doing a lot of more in-depth analysis, which I'm not going to go into right now, and some of it we're just getting into the nitty-gritty of right now. But I think these two maps are really kind of informative. One is showing the peak hour outbound. So these are all the folks in Cupertino who are leaving in the morning, and this is where they're going. So the darker color is more trips, and the lighter is fewer trips. But you can see people are going all over the region from Cupertino. And then the peak hour to Apple is just one of the things that we're looking at in terms of, one major employer in the area. Where are people that are going to that employer, where are they coming from? And you can see they're coming, again, from all over the Bay Area. And what this does is it helps us to better understand what types of potential investments or recommendations will actually potentially influence behavior. So you can kind of see, okay, there is the opportunity for folks from San Francisco coming into Cupertino to take mass transit. But they're probably not biking. So these are the kinds of things that we will do more analysis of and work to better understand, and then we will update as we better understand what is going to be recommended in this special area. And with that, like I said, we're going to have a lot more details about some of these ideas and these concepts, especially around transportation demand management and different tools that we could be thinking about and recommending through this process. Tomorrow at noon will be the brown bag for transportation. Thank you. And now to Dan. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Dora. Thanks, Ben. That was really great. One last section of the presentation here before we allow you all to break out and have conversations with the experts here. It's just I wanted to give an overview, one more overview of the SHRET process, because I know it's a new process to this community. So I wanted to make sure we can get you all engaged in as many ways as you are interested in and available. So we've set up our design studio just, if you go out the doors, just to the right here in the formal council chambers in the EOC. I don't know what EOC stands for. What is EOC? Emergency Operations Center. It's kind of a bunker. It's the room in the middle of so that is where we've set up our space. And I do want to encourage you, even at the end of this presentation tonight, we're going to have a couple people over there. If you want to go and see the space and see the physical model, please come over and see it. We spent a good part of yesterday and this morning setting up that space, so it's ready to go. And we're really excited to be going. So we have a physical model at the scale of 1 inch equals 20 feet. So it's about, 12 feet by 16 feet wide. It's pretty large. So the buildings that are currently on that model that you can see on your right-hand side here in gray are the existing buildings. And so what we're going to do over the course of this week is they're not secured onto that base. So we're going to be able to pull those existing buildings off and use these orange kit of parts that we have, different scales of buildings, and we're going to actually show you what some of the different alternatives look and feel like with those three-dimensional models and have a conversation that way. So this is, I encourage you to go to the studio space after the presentation tonight, walk through the studio and take a look at that, as well as the rest of the studio space that is opened up. We talked about the feedback loops. Once again, the more people we can get engaged in every single one of these feedback loops, the better. So please keep coming back, bring a couple of friends, let a handful of other friends know that they need to be coming. The great part about this is there are many, many ways to participate. And as Bill presented in one of our first meetings, the myth is that for the SHRET to be successful is you have to come every minute of every day to the SHRET process. That's not the case. So there's a lot of different ways that we can get your input over the course of these 5 days. And so the first two is tonight, and then on Friday evening from 6 to 7:30 p.m. are the 2 points of a very formal presentation, where we've put slides in PowerPoint. We'll be sort of doing spending the time to present to you. And today was the kickoff, and on Friday it will be the summary. And what I want to remind you is the goal for this 5 days, and I mentioned this in the last, is an ideal scenario we would get to 3 alternatives. So that's our goal. And those alternatives might have different program mixes. They may have different size buildings in different locations. They may have different layouts of public spaces, of a street network, sort of all those different things we'll be looking at. But the opening and the closing are the 2 formal points of presentation. And those are going to be happening here. So those two events will be happening in the Cupertino Community Hall from 6 to 7:30. So then we have a really important milestone in the middle on Wednesday evening, once again from 6 to 7:30, and this is going to be in the EOC, where we just call it a midpoint pinup. We're not going to do a digital presentation. We'll have printouts and hand drawings, a lot of really sketchy images up on the walls, and we'll just simply talk about what the team has studied over the course of the last couple of days based on the input we've gotten to date, the input we get tonight, and tying that back to the guiding principles, your general plan policies, and all that feedback that we've gotten from you and will continue to get from you. So what I would say is if you have limited time, like the beginning, middle, and end are the best times to pop in to the charrette. But we do want you to come in more often if it's possible. So this is what the charrette studio walls will look like. There's going to be base maps. There's going to be lots of layers of trace paper over the top of that with some really sketchy images. We might have some 11 by 17 prints, some bigger prints of different drawings or modeling that we're doing. But especially between now and Friday, it's all a work in progress. It's like it's designing in public. I mean, this is a live process, and this is the really fun part. And we want you to come and participate as much as possible. Right? You'll have the physical model. We'll be adjusting the pieces to sort of form the different alternatives and discuss those at the different points in the charrette process. And both Dara and Greg, and I mentioned earlier, these brown bag lunches from 12 to 1 o'clock on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. It's transportation tomorrow with Alta. It's the economics on Wednesday, and with both with EPS and Main Street Properties, Ben and Steve Lawton, Ben Sigmund and Steve Lawton. And on Thursday, we're gonna do a lunchtime session on what is a form-based code, why would it be a good tool to use here to implement the specific plan vision. I do want to say is that it's called a brown bag because we are not providing lunch. You have to bring your brown bag with your lunch in it. So, but we do hope if you have either one or all of these as a real interest to you, come to these sessions. This is where we're going to really drill down into a lot of detail on those specific topics, and you can get a lot of one-on-one time with those experts on our teams and those topics. And those, once again, the brown bags are going to happen in this room. The charrette studio is a little bit too small. You'll see when you get over there, the model takes up about a third of the space. We have some desks, workstations set up, so we wanted to make sure there was enough room for as many people that wanted to come to those brown bag lunches here. Sorry, on Thursday, it's actually in the City Hall lobby. We're shuffling a bit here because finding the space was, for the 5 days, was a bit of a challenge. So the other part of this, and this is really what makes the charrette a charrette and a sort of ongoing sort of designing in public engagement with you all, is we have open studio from 10 a.m. basically through different periods of the afternoon, but if you include the pinups, it goes to 6:30 or 7:30 in the afternoon. And what this means is we're not going to stop our work. We're going to be busily working on computers and 3D models. People are going to be drawing. Ben's going to be crunching numbers in Excel. Dara's going to be thinking about how can we sort of reduce this traffic demand. So we're all going to be busily, but what you can do is if you have a specific question or you just simply want to know what's happened over the course of the last day, 2 days, we'll grab somebody on the team that can best sort of lead you through the information you want and make sure you get your questions answered and get up to date on what's been happening in the studio. So it's an ongoing live design process, but we'll want to make sure that you get the information you need if you do take the time to come. So on your way into work, on your lunch break, on your way home from work, pop in to the design studio because we do want you to continue to come because there are going to be a lot of progress drawings over the course of the week that we sort of want to explain to you. We want to explain the thought behind it. We want to explain how it ties into the economics, how it ties into transportation and mobility options, how it ties into sort of the high quality town center that you all want and have defined in your general plan process. And so we're going to update this daily at envisionvalco.org. So please do go online there too. And now I'm going to just open this up to these topic-specific breakouts. So we have transportation over here in this corner. We have general background information in the back, charrette schedule. We have form-based coding sort of on my left in the back in the purple. Updated guiding principles and survey results. And then we have the general plan and SB 35. Where was economics? I missed economics here. What's that? Over here. Ben's going to be right over here. So you can pick one area and go to one area and spend all your time in one area. You can hop to different areas. What we wanted to do is we wanted to give you the opportunity to go up and ask really specific questions to the experts, so you can get some really good answers to kick off this charrette process. And I do also, we'll have a couple people over in the EOC in the design studio. Please feel free to work your way over there on your way out, see the studio space. I think people get really excited when they see the command center there. We've got a lot of really cool things set up. So I want to thank you for coming tonight. Once again, come back, bring your friends. We want as many people as possible. We want to fill these seats and then some over the course of the rest of the week. So thank you for coming, and please do come back. We're really excited to kick off this process.